Imagine for a second you stripped away every single formal NLP technique. So you're not allowed to use swish patterns or chaining anchors or belief change scripts or timeline scripts, nothing. Just you and a room full of regular small business owners who have never heard the phrase NLP before, and one simple question. Is it possible to create life-changing transformation and help people get really great results without ever mentioning the word NLP or using any sort of formal change technique from the NLP toolbox? So that's exactly what I've been doing every week for the last 18 months. And what I discovered completely changed how I personally will teach NLP going forwards. It turns out the tools we parade as advanced NLP are really only necessary about 10% of the time. The real magic, the part that creates identity level change and real world results, happens long before we ever reach for these techniques. So recently I spoke at the IFNLP International Conference, that's the International Federation of NLP, where NLP trainers, master trainers and practitioners and coaches came together to rethink how we work with NLP. So the video you're about to watch is the talk that I gave at the conference, where I lay out my NLP framework for the future and how I think we have accidentally built echo chambers in the personal development world. And also the one thing that's really holding NLP back from reaching millions of people who desperately need it, the so-called tools and techniques. I share with you for the first time a ridiculously simple 4-part foundational framework to NLP that works even when nobody in the room knows what NLP is. So if you've struggled to explain what is NLP, or you just want to see how to get breakthrough results without sounding like an NLP brochure, then grab a coffee and let's jump in and see if we can shift your thinking. Today, I want to share with you not so much content about NLP, but more about taking a step back from NLP and looking at the patterns and thoughts that created this amazing system that we have today. And I want to start by just pointing out some of the maybe not so obvious sides of what NLP has given us. And what I mean by that is, when somebody comes across NLP for the first time, quite often they might experience something like light bulb moments that change their life. And that's actually the strapline of our business, giving you light bulb moments to change your life. And if you think back to maybe your first light bulb moment when you discovered NLP, it's like that aha moment where something shifts inside of you. Something changes in how you see the world. And then you maybe do a formal training, or you become a practitioner, master practitioner, trainer, master trainer. And sometimes it's very easy to forget those early days of what was the difference that made the difference when you started that journey. I certainly did, and I've been teaching NLP for 20 years, but it's not my main career. I don't want to point that out. I'm a technical architect. I do cloud engineering architecture for enterprises. And I've worked, as Simon briefly mentioned, I've worked in different places like the London Stock Exchange and lots of enterprise companies. That it's not my home. My home is really with small business and startups. My home is with people where I can reach out and connect and you know, feel the flesh, literally connect with people and be in the same room with them and feel part of a revolution or an evolution of where they are, where they're trying to get to. So something happened a couple of years ago, in that after lockdown, being this technical wizard guy that I am, I decided that lots of people are going to struggle with COVID and online technology. And it was my duty, my mission, to show people how to figure out technology so they could use online systems and they could do coaching online. And I built a platform called the Academy for Lifelong Learning, which was all technical, all software-based systems, so we could do all the things that we can do today. Except around that time, a little company called Zoom came along and kind of like just beat me to it. And they just gave everything away in a way that all the stuff I had done wasn't really necessary. All this like clever technology, because now you could just use Zoom and click a button, or use Teams and click a button, and you had all of this amazing technology. So I got really burnt out by this, because I don't know if you've ever experienced something like this, but if you've done a lot of work on a subject, and some of you know this, if you've put a lot of work into a particular topic or subject area, and you don't get the recognition, or you don't get the credit, you don't get the feedback that you've done a good job, it's very hard to keep your motivation going. Anybody experience that? Just do me a favor, guys. Let's get some interaction going here. Could you just type yes in chat if that's ever happened to you, where you've put a lot of work into something, but you didn't get the response? Yeah. And you didn't get the response. You said, oh man, it's really hard to keep that going. And that's the nature of burnout, isn't it? It's not that you're burned out. You just have no motivation left. It's because it's like, well, why bother? And that's one of the kind of pivotal moments when I realized there's two types of credit in the world. There's the credit you get because somebody gives you feedback, but there's also credit that you get when somebody pays you. Okay. And it's important not to mix those two up, and know that both have a place and both are important. Where this started is way back in April of 1997. Would you believe the last century? Okay. I'm that old. Okay. So the last century, I was working in the university as a lecturer in the computer science department. I was doing a PhD in physics, but I didn't get to finish it because I was one of these people that I loved helping people. I love being of service to people. I love giving people the benefit of the doubt and saying, I'd love to help you. Maybe someday you could help me. But that's not the way things work in the academic circles, and probably in a lot of enterprises as well. Is that if you help somebody in a large enterprise, a nameless enterprise or a heartless enterprise, then people say, he's the guy who always helps people. If you ever need an extra bit of help, ask this guy or ask this girl. I don't know if that's ever happened to you. There's a phrase for that. It's called people pleasing. So I was a people pleaser. I was a really good people pleaser. And as a lecturer, my responsibilities was something like 6 hours of lecturing a week. It wasn't a very heavy schedule, but because of the responsibilities that I took on beyond my role, I ended up working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. And then I go out on a Saturday night and have a few drinks and basically spend most of Sunday sleeping it off. That was my life in the last century. And I did not know anything about NLP. I did not know anything about personal development. In fact, I didn't even know that you make pictures in your mind. I was clueless about this. And this is important. I'll come back to why this is important later on. Because when you've been in the NLP space for a while, maybe you forget what life was like before you first learned NLP. This is important. So what I did is I decided that it was my boss was the problem. And the people weren't nice and all these different things. So what did I do? Just before I was made a permanent lecturer with tenure, lifetime job with pension and long holidays, I quit. 2 weeks before I got that. It was 2 years contract and I would have been promoted to becoming a full-time lecturer. I quit that and I joined a small startup, and there was the first startup I got involved in. And it was fascinating. As a startup, I don't know if you've ever worked with an IT startup, but there's always more work than people. And guess what? The same pattern happened again. I was working till 11 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. Okay. And while it was wonderful and fun, this is during the early days of the dot-com boom back in 99, 2000. While it was fun, the same thing happened again. I started getting really tired and fed up the fact that I wasn't really getting the credit for the work I was doing. And we were overloaded, so we brought in a guy, a freelancer, to help with one of the projects I was working on, and I hired him. And this guy was a really interesting character. He was like 6'4". He used to wear a long black coat, like the Matrix coat. It's around the time of the Matrix, actually. And he had long black hairs, like down to his back. He was about 3 foot long in a ponytail. And he walked with this air of confidence. And he would go in and you ask him to do something, he'd just go, okay, it's done. What do you want next? So he had this ability to have this confidence and air about him that made people just be in awe of his presence and his ability to get things done. This is important. And I remember I got to know him quite well. I brought him out for a coffee down in Key Street in Galway. And I said to him, what is it about you? I mean, you just have this kind of, this attitude or this sort of ability to get things done really well. And he says, oh, you need to learn NLP. It's all NLP. And he says, what's NLP? And I said, I tell you what, rather than me explaining it to you, why don't you just ring this person where I got trained and they'll talk to you. And that was the first of the journey into NLP. And I rang the lady and I ended up doing the training. Now, he thought I might just do the NLP practitioner training and help me get out of these patterns I have of being a people pleaser, working nonstop, and having a little bit more, I would say, structure and consistency in my life. But being the sort of person I am, I go all in on things. I didn't just do the NLP introduction training. I did all of the trainings. I'll just put it like that. Which does happen when you find something that really sort of moves you and you say, I gotta learn everything about this. Needless to say, it totally changed my life, and I ended up running an NLP training business. What was interesting is that I didn't know a lot about business, but I knew a lot about NLP. I studied it profusely for about 2 years. And my first training, I got feedback from people who were in the industry, in the personal development industry, therapists and trainers who'd been there for like maybe, I don't know, 20 years, who said my training was one of the best trainings they ever did in their life. Now, the reality is, looking 20 years back on that experience, I had modeled excellence really well, but I didn't necessarily have a lot of competence. I just said things that I had learned, memorized, and I could do the exercises to the degree where it gave other people the answers that I probably didn't even understand the problems at that stage. Does that make sense? It's kind of, I had the ability to give the right answers without necessarily understanding the questions. And sometimes that's one of the side effects of modeling. You look like you're operating a much higher level than where you actually think you're at, because you have the skill and you have the answers. But the thing I wasn't very good at this stage was running a business, because I never ran a business before. I came from a background of business. So over the next 20 years, I've worked with lots of small businesses, and I've worked with lots of IT companies, and I've worked in lots of enterprises, and I've learned a few lessons along the way. Back to COVID, and having gotten burnt out from building this platform for lifelong learning, I kind of felt sorry for myself and I stopped everything. I took basically a 1.5 year break and basically felt sorry for myself, slightly amplified by something called chronic fatigue. Debilitating chronic fatigue is the way I used to describe it. Now I think it is just basically an unfortunate situation that I had to learn to deal with. But as a result of that, I ended up reaching out to some friends of mine, because I wasn't teaching NLP at this stage. This is about 4 years ago. So 20 years of experience in NLP, I'm not teaching NLP, lots of experience. And a friend of mine reached out to me, said, I run a marketing company for tradesmen. And one of the big problems I have is that while the tradesmen know how to market themselves, they're not doing it. And I think it's a mindset issue. Would you mind coming over and speaking to these people about mindset? And I said, well, I don't really have a lot else going on. So sure, I'll see what it's like. So I came over to the UK and I gave a presentation, and I literally floored the room. It was a really bizarre experience, because I hadn't spoken to anybody for nearly 2 years, 1.5 years at this stage. And you could see the people's eyes widening as they told story after story about NLP and the importance of mindset and all this sort of stuff. But I didn't have an offer. I didn't have anything to sell people. So James, my buddy who runs this marketing company, asked, would I mind coming back every year and doing every couple of times a year and talking about mindset? And we did. And we're doing that now for a couple of years, for about 2 years now, 2.5 years. And then he says, you got to offer something. So what can I offer? I don't really want to sell products. I don't want to do this, that, and the other. She said, why don't you just do a little call once a week with people? I said, well, that sounds like a really good idea. So I offered the opportunity to give a call and got a whole bunch of people got booked out in the first event. And I've been doing that for the last 18 months now. And it's literally mindset mastery. We call it mindset mastery, and it's about how to master mindset, but it's for tradesmen. None of the people who joined had ever heard of NLP. They had never heard of personal development. They have no interest in hypnosis. Is something you see on the stage. And I learned more about NLP in the last 1.5 years than I've learned in the last 20 years of teaching NLP practitioners. And the reason for that is because we have created an echo chamber in the industry around personal development. And part of it is created by things like The Secret, and the law of attraction, and the power of manifestation. And the challenge is when you work in the area of personal development for a long time, you start to recognize patterns, and those patterns aren't necessarily the problems, but the patterns that you see. And some of those patterns are common patterns and other ones are not common patterns. So I want to talk about some of these patterns here today. One of the patterns I want to talk about is a book I came across. If my clicker will work. Clicker's not working. I would explain it. Is a pattern called Profit First. Now, if you're a small business owner, you may have come across a book called Profit First. And literally is one of the biggest patterns that's changed my life around how I see business and how I mentor businesses. And what it comes down to is that if you ask a small business owner, how are you doing? They'll say, I'm busy. But no, how are you doing? I mean, are you profitable or are you not profitable? It says, well, I'll let you know when my accountant looks at my books at the end of the year. That's the standard response from working with over 56 business owners in the last 18 months. I can tell you for a fact, most of them have no idea whether they're profitable or not, even though they might be making a lot of money. And this approach is a pattern. It's a pattern of how you treat. This is a pattern of how you treat money. And it's about saying when your money comes in, first thing you want to do is put 5% aside for profit. And then put, 15% aside for tax, 20% aside for VAT, and then split the rest according to ops wages and maybe your dividend payments. And this model is really great because if at any one time you look at your bank account, you can just see how much is in your profit pot. It's 5%. How much is in your ops and wages pot? Have you overspent or not? It's a very powerful model for turning the whole accountancy model on its head and just saying, in 1 second, I can open up my phone and look at my Mons account, which allows you to have pots for money, and say, okay, great. I know exactly how much profit I have. I know how much is in my VAT pot. I know how much is in my tax pot. I know how much is in my salary wages pot. So in 1 second, I can tell you how my business is doing. And this has changed how I mentor people, but also changed how they see their business. Now, that's a pattern, and it's a very useful pattern. It's a structure. It's a framework. Why is that important? Because in coaching, I also teach something called the heartbeat of a model. This is the heartbeat of a model in a nutshell. Heartbeat model is about understanding that when something happens that changes your life, that light bulb moment I talked about, before you have the light bulb moment, there's usually some sort of a shock or a wake-up call. And then what happens is you make a decision. Now, this is important. Some people make a good decision. Some people make a bad decision. Okay? Usually what happens is you make a decision, but you don't follow through. You don't commit. So what happens is after you make the decision, you actually go into a crisis because you're not taking action. You made the decision, but you haven't done anything about this. And it's only when you get to the very bottom of that crisis, what I call the valley of despair, do you actually commit to the decision you've already made. And that's when you actually get a light bulb moment. It usually happens when you talk to somebody else, or you read a book, or you see a different perspective. And this is important. We'll come back to this. Something shifts in your reality. Remember this phrase, something shifts in your reality and you develop a new identity. Say, wow, I'm no longer that person. I'm not willing to put up with that pain anymore. I want to go in a different direction. And you start a journey until you get through this plan, and then you battle through that plan, and some of the plan works and some of it doesn't. And eventually, if you keep pushing through, what happens is you have a breakthrough. And once you get the breakthrough, then you can take your foot off the gas. And what happens is you actually get the result, and you can tell other people about that journey. Now, this is literally a pattern that's based on a number of different models. It's based on, number one, it's based on the what's called the Scriptwriter's Bible. If you've ever seen the Scriptwriter's Bible or any drama or story, it's going to be based on this sort of pattern. Also, German New Medicine. So you've got the conflict area and the resolution area. That kind of brings that in as well. And the coaching model, and also something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. So all of that together creates this pattern, which looks what I call the heartbeat of a story. And every story has it. There's a heartbeat. If you just notice the shape of it, it's a heartbeat. Why is that important? Because there's a pattern. And when you recognize the pattern, you can say, well, actually, I know I had a shock here. I made a decision. I went into this crisis. I came up with a plan. I battled through it and got the result. People recognize that story in films. They recognize it in their own lives. If you recognize that pattern, then you can do something about it. Okay? Why is this important? Because this is a very, very important pattern as an example of several patterns I'm going to share with you today. Another great pattern which you might have come across is called Dilts' neurological levels. A lot of you have come across this in the very early days of NLP training. And what it says really is that your results are dependent on what you do, your behavior. But your behavior is dependent on your skills and abilities. I'm teaching all hat. You know all this. And your skills and abilities are based on your beliefs. So if you have certain skills and abilities, but you don't believe you're good at it, you're not going to use those skills and abilities. Does that make sense? But even if you believe something, but it's not important to you, that's called your values, you're unlikely to actually put the work in, even though you believe you can get the result because you have the skills and abilities. So what happens is you might not actually get the results. But if you believe you're good at something, and that identity statement, I am excellent at technical architecture, I am excellent at a trainer, I am excellent at whatever you want to call that, then all the rest of the things kind of fall in place. Now, why am I telling you this? This is the model that we've all learned, and we know this model, and we probably tell our students about this model. But I came across something recently which is a different pattern of understanding the Dilts model, and I want to share this with you because it's a different framework that you also know, but probably not in this way. If you do know it this way, then you're ahead of me, because I didn't know this until about a couple of months ago. And it's based on one of the early members of the NLP community from the 1970s, a guy called Gregory Bateson, who was very much involved in ecology. And I just realized I never got to change the spelling mistake on his name. So just ignore that. Just do a deletion on the spelling of Gregory Bateson. He's a model called Learning and Growth. Okay. And he talked about 4 levels for learning and growth. And this is really important, because what he said is that there's 4 levels to learning. Okay, people learn in different ways. They have different levels of awareness, and they have different levels of abilities around how they grow. So think about learning and growth. Some people, and this is not like the Dilts this hierarchy. It's slightly different. What it says is that level 0 is about habit. It means that some people, they learn and grow by osmosis, by their environment, by the people who are around them. You might have heard the phrase, the person who, you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And what that means is that some people just learn by being in the environment of other people. So if you're in a good environment, you're going to learn good behaviors. And if you've got a bad environment, you're going to have bad behaviors. But the reality is that nearly 50% of the population of this planet, this is how they learn. This is important as an NLP practitioner or a person in the NLP space. A lot of people, the way they learn is through osmosis. That's it, right? But a lot of people have other more advanced ways of learning. The second level that Gregory Bateson talked about was about the level of correction. What does that mean? It means you make a decision. Remember I said that word earlier? You make a decision to learn something. I decide to do a master's or a PhD, or decide to change jobs, or decide to get involved in a relationship. And then what happens is you make the decision and you follow through, but you go through a journey and things go wrong. Do you give up? Some people do. But the people who persevere will end up learning a new skill. The skill of relating, the skill of having a PhD, or a new skill or a new job. So people who make decisions and actually accept there's no failure, only feedback, and learn to overcome their obstacles, they will develop new skills. So what's the difference between level 0 and level 1 is people at level 1 make a decision to learn something, and they know they're going to fail in the beginning, but eventually they get there and they say, now I know X, I have that skill. Doesn't that sound very like the skill level in the Dilts model? Let's move on. So that's, some people will actually go beyond level 0. They'll make a decision to learn something, they'll learn it. Now other people, they're more evolved. They've got more self-awareness. And what they do is they actually recognize context changes. What that means is they see a pattern, like Profit First or the Heartbeat of Model or the Dilts model. They see a pattern in one area of life, and they realize if they change context, they can apply the same pattern in a different area. Now, I don't know if you thought about this before, but if you recognize a pattern in one area and then you apply that same pattern to a different area, what you've done is you've generalized the pattern. Sounds a little bit like generalizations in NLP, doesn't it? Now, when you generalize something across different contexts, what that does, it gives you a general pattern called a belief. And those beliefs transfer across different contexts. Sounds a little bit like the belief level at the Dilts level. And what's more is that belief is built around certain things that are important, which means it's tied to values as well. We know this from NLP because we know that the values have a set of beliefs around them. So level 2 is about understanding to recognize patterns and moving the patterns across different contexts. So some people will learn and grow because they recognize patterns, and they'll take those patterns and apply them to different areas. And finally, level 3 in Gregory Bateson's learning and growth model is about, I've renamed this, but it's about identity shifting. And I use the word identity shifting because if you go to YouTube today, you type identity shift or identity shifting into YouTube, you're going to get thousands of people who are talking about identity shifting as a change mechanism. And I want you to do some homework today. And before tomorrow, give me feedback tomorrow. I give Simon or Vivi the feedback tomorrow. Look at the comments of what people are saying on some of the bigger videos about identity shifting. People are going, oh my God, this is amazing. What is identity shifting? Identity shifting is about changing your identity. I am good. I am a father. I am a worker. I'm not confident. I'm not good enough. I'm better. It's all of these limiting beliefs that we know we can change using things like time heals paradigm, timeline therapy, belief change systems. All of this comes down to identity shifting, but has nothing to do with NLP. And what's interesting about identity shifting, that it really should be called changing your identity. And that's exactly what NLP does. It helps people to change the I am equivalence of their identity. I'm wrong. I'm not good enough, which always is caused by a limiting belief, a limiting decision that created a belief that we know we can change by actually changing that decision. So level 3, some people will actually evolve and grow because they actually change their identity. Why is this important? Because I announced to myself 5 years ago when I came up with the heartbeat of a model, I realized that the bottom of that valley of despair, that's where people make a decision to change their identity. So it happens totally naturally outside of NLP anyways. If people make a decision, I'm not going to deal with this bullshit anymore, I'm going to change my life. So what this gives us is a 4-tier level. Now, what's interesting, if you look in the corner there, Gregory Bateson proposed this model in 1962. It's at least 10 years before NLP even was created. This model became the DILS model, but we talked about results rather than talking about levels of learning and growth. Now, what's happened is this has come full circle, and now in 2025, what's happened is identity shifting is coming out as a massive big wave of personal development growth. And if you're in the NLP space, you need to know about it, because the problem is identity shifting is a wonderful model about identity change, but the people who are teaching it, 90% of the people who teach it, do not have the tools and techniques that you have to actually change identity. So it's a little bit like The Secret or the law of attraction from 20 years ago, if you remember that. It's about saying, all you have to do is imagine you're somebody else and then pretend you're somebody else and fake it till you make it. And maybe you can do affirmations or journaling, but they're not change techniques. So it won't work unless you actually are lucky to actually be in the right place of that valley of despair and make a decision to change your identity. But using the NLP techniques, we can help people to identify their obstacle, their challenges, things that hold them back, and most importantly, the friction points to stop them moving forward. This is really interesting for me, because what it says to me is that the patterns that we accept in NLP don't necessarily come from NLP. In fact, most of them are not new patterns. Historically, they've come from other areas like Fritz Perls or Virginia Satir or Milton Erickson that were already doing their stuff before NLP took those models of excellence and started using them. And then I started asking myself, well, what is NLP really? What is NLP really? And I realized what NLP really is, it's a reality shift framework, giving you light bulb moments to change your life. And essentially, the problem with NLP, as we've actually talked about already today, is that we don't have a common set of definitions of what NLP is. So what happens, we've got different definitions depending on the school and the context and who you're talking to. And quite honestly, most of them aren't actually useful, because most of them only make sense after you've practiced NLP. And you say, oh yeah, of course, it's the trail of techniques that's left behind, or it's the attitude and methodology that leaves behind the trail of techniques, or it's a version of subjective reality, or whatever you want to call it. But the reality is that NLP is a reality shift framework, right? And so is Profit First. Profit First is reality shift framework. The heartbeat model is a reality shift framework. CBT is a reality shift framework. The 7 laws of highly successful people is a reality shift framework. But because what it fundamentally does, it gets you to go from where you are to where you want to be. Okay. And this is it in a nutshell. A reality shift framework is about 3 things. The first part is about awareness. Okay. Awareness of seeing the pattern. Right? I've showed several patterns to you today. You have to see the pattern first. Once you see the pattern, then you have a choice. The choice is to accept that pattern as something that you own. I am the creator of that pattern. I am the person that causes this pattern. Consciously or unconsciously, I'm the person who is responsible for this pattern happening in my life because it's my life. It's my subjective reality. And then the third part is what am I going to do to change, or what action am I going to take in order to change that pattern to become a better pattern? Okay. And this comes down to, and you've seen this model before, but maybe not in this way. It's about see the pattern. That's called self-awareness. The second part then is owning the pattern. And that's the hard part, is going through that valley of despair and making a decision, following through, going through a journey, having a plan, having a breakthrough, and then acting to create a better future. It's about see, own, and act. Now, what's really interesting is that if you go back to the Gregory Bateson's model around training and growth, if most people learn from their environment only, that means most people will not have the awareness that patterns even exist. So what I think is key to NLP is your ability to recognize the patterns in the first place. Right? And also making a decision to do something about it. So level 1 is about making a decision to learn a new skill. Level 2 then is actually about recognizing that patterns exist across different contexts, across different relationships, across different jobs. And then making a decision to change your identity as a result of that awareness, which comes down to level 3 in Gregory Bateson's model. My point is this: most people won't have the awareness to change their beliefs. They won't have the awareness to change their identity, except by luck. But what NLP gives us is to give people a journey to can go on. Now, you might have seen this diagram before, which is the curve that goes from where you are to where you want to be. And you've seen that model many times: present state, desired state. And that is the reality shift framework, but maybe not in the same ways you've seen about it before. So what I wanted to do is, when I was talking to these small business owners, I said, I can't just teach them the NLP prac. They have access. I give them, all of them, access to my NLP practitioner home study program. So all the videos, I've got over 40 hours of videos from trainings I've done since 2017 or so about a whole bunch of different trainings. And they're really great trainings, but a lot of them are around coaching and practitioner stuff and therapy. They're not really necessary for business owners. So the question I had to ask then was, how do I reframe all of NLP into something that is easy for people to grasp no matter where they are in the journey? And I came up with something, or created something called Foundations to NLP. And what it is actually a really simple model that I want to share with you. Not because I want you to learn this model. I want you to steal this model. I want you to use this model if you find it useful to explain NLP to other people. And it comes down to this. It's about 4 different components. All of NLP is just 4 different ideas. Okay. The first one is mindset. The second was motivation. The third one was messaging. In fact, the fourth one isn't even part of the foundations. It's what comes next. So let me explain what I mean by that. Essentially, what happens is that when you learn NLP, first of all, something shifts in your mindset. You have a reality shift, light bulb moments that change your life. And that first step is about a shift in your mindset. And essentially, all it is really is about going from where you are right now to where you want to be. If somebody doesn't have a clear outcome of where they're trying to get to, NLP won't help them, right? It could, but it's unlikely to stick. because you need to know where you are and where you want to be. And the way you do that with small business owners is that we actually talk to them about goal setting. So we have this thing called the goal setting journal. It's a present day future. And this is literally the slide I put up there. And the start of the seminar, I say, guys, take out your phones, take a picture of that and download it. And all it is the keys to achievable outcomes. It's a 26-page PDF. If you don't have something like this, guys, build one for yourselves. It's just it's keys to achievable outcome, SMART goals, but some extra stuff in there and some stories in there that makes it more interesting and more intriguing. And then what I do is I do master classes on how to get the outcomes you want for your business, because business owners need to be profitable in business. Now, this is where a light bulb moment went off for me, and it's realized why I enjoy working with these people so much, is that when you're in business, you have a goal of actually building your business. But if you're a personal development junkie, what happens is you're saying, oh, I've got all of these problems. I've got all of these challenges. I've got all of this stuff I have to deal with. I've got chronic fatigue. I'm tired. I can't get the right clients. I can't get this, that, and the other. So what we do is we bitch and moan about the problems we have in our life. What's important about this is that in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, they talk about where there be negative thinking, let there be contemplation to the opposite. What that means is that if you're bitching and moaning all day long, then you should be able to spend some time contemplating the opposite of that. And those things are called little wins. So what we teach people in our group is to focus on little wins, 3 little wins every day. It could be you got out of bed in time. It could be you went to the gym. It could be you did that job you never wanted to do. What are the little wins? Because writing down your little wins is contemplation to the opposite of the bitching and moaning that goes on every day. And that balances things out. And then with that and the goal setting, what we have is we've got a different mindset. And it's as simple as that. Now we teach them all these things as well, but really it's just principles. It's like the presuppositions, the presuppositions of NLP, things like that. And then, so that's one big chunk of what we talk about. It's just mindset, right? And the mindset is tied to goals. But then they find out the next thing that people have a challenge with is understanding motivation. They say to me when they write down the forms, I want more motivation. But it's not about motivation. It's really about understanding how they set these goals correctly. And what I found is most people, about 85% of people who are not familiar with personal development, will actually set repulsive goals, not attractive goals. And you know what I mean by repulsive goals. They're away froms. Okay, and the repulsive goals are, I want to be rich. Why? So I have lots of money. Why? So I'm not broke. Okay, so you've got a picture in your mind about being broke. Yeah, that happened to me 5 years ago. I don't want to go back there. So you're trying to get away from that. That's a repulsive goal. And we know that if you've got a repulsive goal, you get drawn back towards it. But when you actually set an attractive goal, which is good for you, the people around you, your planet, an ecological goal, what it does, it changes how you see the future. And this comes down to the identity shift again. So that's really all we talk about. And then we go into more detail about all of this stuff, borrowing stuff from submodalities and anchoring and triggers and all that sort of stuff. And the next area then is the one that you probably recognize, messaging, which is about language. And language really we talk about here is just the modalities, and we talk about things like packaging and what I call the precision model. I don't like the word meta model, so I call it the precision model, the original name for it, because it's about getting more precise. And I talk about models of persuasion, which is Milton patterns. They love the word persuasion. How do we persuade people? And that's essentially what I teach, and then chunking between them and better questions to ask. That's messaging. And then finally we talk about mastery, but mastery is not what you might think it is. What I do is I share with them what I talked to you guys earlier on, which is the Dunning-Kruger effect. Now, if you're not familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, let me just explain it in 2 diagrams. I became a yoga teacher back about 2005, Kundalini Yoga, and I teach Kundalini Yoga, not currently, but I used to do a lot of that, and I used to do a lot of meditation. And this is one of the models that came from Kundalini Yoga, is that as you go through the journey of competency, you start off as a novice, and then that's the first phase. And then once you conquer the phase of being a novice, then you're the apprentice. Once you get beyond being an apprentice, you actually you go through what's called SAT. Forget the name of it. It's so long since I've talked about it now. It's called the struggle, SATPAD. So the SATPAD, what you're doing is you go through struggle, and this is where a lot of people walk away from NLP, walk away from yoga, walk away from the job, walk away from relationships. They go through the struggle and they don't make a decision to get to the other end. They haven't made the decision to get to the other end. Because it's only when you go through the struggle that you really are the craftsman. You're getting good at your wares, your skills, and then that leads to mastery. Now, this actually maps directly onto the Dunning-Kruger effect. And here's the Dunning-Kruger effect. When you learn something for the first time, your confidence might be very high, but your competence might not be that high. And this is what it looks like. And this diagram here maps directly onto the model from yoga about the different stages. What's interesting is when you do a training, especially an online training or read it in a book, your confidence is very high about something because you've given the perfect model with the perfect mentors and the perfect coaches to make sure you do the perfect exercise. You come out of this exercise with a high degree of competence, but very little real world experience. And this is what they call, in Dunning-Kruger, Mount Stupid. Right? I didn't come up with that phrase, so don't blame me. That's what it's called, Mount Stupid. And you've seen it, guys, the people who know everything but they know nothing. And they come out and say, I can change your life in 15 minutes in a lab situation with the perfect exercise and the perfect coach. And then what happens? People fall from grace and they end up in the valley of despair, that word again. What's the valley of despair? That's when people say, I don't know if NLP really works. Well, of course it doesn't work in that context because you're missing this context. That comes from experience. This is why I don't like accelerated trainings. I've done them for years, but I've realized that people who actually got the most from accelerated trainings are people who were on a mission and they had to learn it because they were going to do something with what they'd learned. They're setting up a business or they're on some sort of a journey or they're trying to fix something in their life and they took action straight away, right? Awareness, seeing what's going on, taking responsibility for the pattern and then changing the life. Subjective reality framework. And this is what actually led me to realize that mastery is not about mastering something quickly. It takes time because you have to go through these different phases before you master something. So what we teach is we teach the trail of techniques, but we don't teach the trail of techniques like swish patterns and submodalities and strategies and, quantum linguistics and sleight of mouth patterns. Yes, there are lessons of mastery, and they're not about what most people learn in those lessons of mastery, like NLP Prac, Master Prac, Trainer's Training, Master Trainer. And they're not even things like presentation mastery or sales mastery. What we teach people could be anything else you put in there. It's something that is an expert skill, a set of expert skills. We teach them small business mastery. And small business mastery is actually much simpler than it sounds. All it is really about is like, do you know how to master sales? Do you understand how to master marketing? Do you understand how to master what I call the rituals and routines? We call that operations and enterprise. The rituals and routines you have every day to make sure you've always got leads coming in. And do you understand how to master cash flow, which is like profit first, coming back to what I started off. And that's essentially what we do, is we teach people the foundations and we don't teach them the tools and techniques. And that's all I got for you today, guys. So I hope you found that useful. If you have questions, hopefully we can answer some questions for a couple of minutes before we're finished. So thank you very much.